This is Brendan Davies. Welcome to another archive episode of our podcast, On the Making Of. In this particular episode, Brian and I interviewed Yo La Tengo. We did the interview in March of 2018 in New York City, and the article was subsequently published in the July-August issue of Tape-Op magazine of that same year. The article was titled Yo La Tengo, Finding Analog in the Digital. I'm going to read to you the introduction that I wrote for that article, and then we will begin the interview. Photographer Brian T. Silac and I met up with indie rock legends Yo La Tengo at the Soho, Manhattan offices of Matador Records. We discussed the evolution of the band's songwriting and recording process throughout the course of their 30-plus year career, culminating in the lush soundscape of their 15th album and newest release, at that time, There's a Riot Going On. It was an interesting conversation, and I may have gotten Ira Kaplan, Georgia Hubley, and James McNew to open up about a few things. Let's talk about your recording process and how it's evolved over the years, from your first 7-inch and LP releases that you guys did in the 80s, up through the new album, which comes out in a week and a half. I know it's a broad question, so ready, set, start. No.
Where did you make that first single?
Water Music.
Yeah, how about that?
Yeah. Water Music.
Right, the first single and the first album and the second album, I think we just went to studios and recorded. We had never made a demo before or anything like that. The first time we ever made demos in any fashion was the songs on President Yo La Tengo. Our pal Tara from Antietam came over with a state-of-the-art Tascam 4-track.
Oh, those are the best.
Yeah.
And recorded us. And sadly, nobody can find that recording.
Oh, that's a shame.
We had it.
Yeah.
But things, things have really evolved, like so many things about our band, when James joined, and thanks to James, because the recording, as you can tell by the Dump discography, he's the most prolific recorder of the three of us.
Sure.
And so that kind of focus on rehearsal recordings and that more and more of that happened with James in the band. And then Fred Brockman, our friend, ended up sharing a Hoboken rehearsal space with us. And
right here where you used to live. Right?
Yeah.
He put in an 8-track studio there, and so when we weren't there, and but we just split time, and he recorded a bunch of demos for us. Very, by far the most evolved demos we'd ever done.
This was
for Painful.
Yeah.
Okay.
Some of them ended up on the Expand. Some on Genius Plus Love, and then on
Nutritia, I think, ended up on the Motel 6 single.
Oh, Fred recorded that?
Yeah.
Remember that. And then Fred also did the first session with Jad Fair that became Strange But True, and that session had a huge impact on our songwriting, where we made up songs kind of on the spot for Jad to sing along with, and enjoyed that so much that we just kept doing that, which put even more emphasis on documenting things we were making up at practice.
Sure. You never know when you're going to have a real gem.
and also because things were happening once, so there wasn't even you practice something, right? So
That's true.
And
that's when we really started recording practices and or at least being ready to record something, just some rough version of practice, whether it was on just a boombox or and then as time went on, we graduated from the boombox to a I think a mini disc player.
Oh, I had one of those. I love those things.
I enjoyed it quite
They
a
were
bit.
a wonderful step
Yes,
along
exactly.
the way from one
knew
technology towards another one.
Yeah, you knew it was temporary.
Yeah.
That was a good arrangement.
Yeah.
This is we're on our way to something else.
But here and there we found opportunities to put out some of these things like Blitzkrieg Bop.
Yep.
That's just a rehearsal recording.
That was a 4-track cassette recording.
Yeah.
Well, 3-track.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right, that and Surfing with the Shah and I think Gooseneck Problem. Some of the other things from that day.
And then later, Blue Green Arrow and
Right.
those
Right.
the Earworm and the Planet singles.
Yeah.
Well, some of the Planet stuff's live, but
So in a way, some things that you hadn't actually necessarily intended to release, but they were more just documenting for songwriting purposes and keeping track
Yeah,
of,
kind
you know,
of, yeah.
are we going to do something with this? I don't know. And then you later on you say, sure.
Yeah.
And I think on Genius
Plus Love.
Plus Love,
Yeah,
there were several things like that, right?
Yeah. and then it just, I mean, it's definitely the roots of that stuff, and we did more of it as time went on. I'm trying to think. I mean, but Fade, I guess, was the biggest change. I don't think there's anything.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, because once we moved out of Jersey City,
Yeah.
we
Right.
just were set up a little differently.
Well, and I think, I mean, you were already doing dump stuff on computer prior to doing our soundtrack stuff.
True.
But
But
had you recorded Yo La Tengo on computer before we did film stuff?
Not really. No, I don't think so. We had done like little project-y things here and there, but nothing official. There were like little like spec like for different things that that never came out. But I like, and I had like different like I came at it with through like like Cool Edit Pro. I think was the first thing that I used.
remember Cool Edit
It was
Pro,
like
sure.
like a Play School kind of version of Pro Tools.
Absolutely.
And, but we like
And Band in a Box, right?
yeah, basically.
Yeah.
But we gave up and joined Society and started using Pro Tools in like 2003, I think, or 2004. Bought the Digi 002, hauled it over to the practice space.
Before that, were you recording the rehearsals, at least the practices? Were you recording those to tape or to like a cassette multi-track?
It depended. Sometimes just we any number of
formats.
Yeah, just to make it more confusing.
You guys were just touching on this, but this is actually my second question. I wanted to talk about your writing process, the collaborative group writing process that sort of evolved out of your rehearsals and sort of playing things extemporaneously and saying, oh, this is a way to write songs, as opposed to one band member sitting down and crafting some lyrics and coming up with a structure and then somebody else setting it to piano or guitar. In your situation, it's a much more sort of organic, cohesive creature that comes out of sort of
cohesive it is, but
While you think about that, I thought of it. I thought when we recorded "It's Christmas Time"
oh yeah,
from the
in Europe,
All
in your
three of those
house.
songs.
yeah.
Oh, it's Christmas time.
Some of that stuff we recorded with Gene
Sorry.
and then finished.
You opened a can of worms.
No, this is
Like we
fascinating.
recorded the basic for Rock and Roll Santa, I think, with Gene
Okay.
for that, like the Nuclear War sessions,
Oh,
perhaps,
really?
and then finished it on our own.
How do you feel that this sort of approach to
Anyway.
songwriting as a group? No. How do you feel that this approach to songwriting as a group has tied into and affected your recording process? Because not just taking into consideration the rehearsals that were sort of released as an afterthought on Genius Plus Love or something like this, but actual like your current album, for example, the one that's coming out in a week and a half. The entire thing was sort of done as a collaborative whole, as an entity, kind of. It sort of it wasn't created by any one person, but just sort of evolved, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Definitely.
How has that played into? How has that much of the recording aspect of it, has that changed or grown, or has it been sort of that way for a while now?
it's kind of moved in that direction for a while. Certainly with Fade, we were doing. James was doing a lot of recording of songs that we ended up augmenting and using when we made the record with John McIntyre.
Sure.
And even I think we released at least one that was just a straight up version from that, and then but I think that was a real. I mean, we had done things like that before, but that was sort of more of a cementing of that way of working for us. And then we did some movie soundtracks, and that would be another thing that kind of helped us focus. At some point we started doing certain pieces as on a grid almost, so that we could then just throw anything in there that would be in time. And I think with
the actual film.
With the film, yeah.
That's definitely a different type of composition.
Oh yeah.
I think another thing is that I can't remember the last time we used a format that wasn't the computer for recording, where time was we'd use the mini disc or something for like a quick, oh, that sounds good, throw up the mini disc. And then at a certain point, James got nimble enough that we'd throw up, he would throw up 2 microphones and make a stereo recording. So not every computer recording we have is a multi-track thing, but we ended up just having this stockpile of all sorts of different types of things that were on the computer. And so I think the more we had on the computer, the more we got used to working with it. And there'd be days when every couple of months we'd just try to remind ourselves what all these files which have,
of course,
what are they again? And I think there became a whole way of thinking of just working with that which we have there and what could we do with them, and rather than it being the song coming out of us playing together, all the songs on this record, maybe 14 of the 15, came out of listening to a recording and then figuring out how we could work with it, and rather than it was the band playing.
So it's definitely I can see how that would have evolved over time to from a sort of writing approach to an actual recording approach.
Songs were definitely recorded before they were written.
This past weekend, I took some time and I listened to all of your albums, which was it was a lot of time.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I tried to familiarize myself with considerable gaps in my knowledge, because I started with 5 CDs, but obviously there's quite a few more albums than that. So thanks to the miracle of YouTube, I was able to listen to at least chunks of a lot, and in some cases entire of your other albums. One thing that struck me was that, unlike some other artists that I've listened to over the years, if you take any one of your albums, there appears to be a very consistent vibe, energy, and musical approach from start to finish. And it's almost sort of like a journey for the listener. And in some cases, I certainly felt this way with your current album, because I had it on cycle play. So when track 1 started again, I said, "My God, this is it's almost like a circular thing. It comes back, it really wraps around itself as far as its style and its sensibilities about itself." How much of that, the cohesiveness that has happened over the course of any one of your albums from start to finish, where the sound is very consistent and it really creates an experience for the listener, not just any one song, but the entity of the album. How much of that do you feel like is a reflection of this writing and recording process that we've been discussing, where there's a lot of jamming and a lot of listening to maybe many more hours than make it on the final project?
I don't know.
Probably has a lot to do with personality and taste, So and also, how we play.
Sure.
Which has obviously evolved over time too. But I think, I don't know that there's any straight up answer to that.
Yeah, sure.
Because you're talking over a pretty long period.
Yeah, no, I didn't necessarily think that.
No, I know.
We were just more
But,
sort of throwing it out there.
Yeah, I mean, certainly in terms of, this is kind of to the side of what you brought up, but I think sequencing has always been, a key part of making a record. At least I love doing it, and
it is. It can make the experience or take something away from it.
Yeah, I think it maybe speaks a little bit to what you're saying. Working
and is that
at
something?
it.
Is that something that you personally have taken a strong role in?
I have on a bunch of the records. This last one, I guess this one I didn't do. I mean, I've never done all of it by myself, but but I know on past records I would kind of come up with an idea, and then they would, people would have an opinion, and then it would change. And this time, I think it was a little more universal, but I know there were specific things. But anyway, we work on it together and get it to where we think it works as a piece.
And
because I don't think I don't think we're aware that what we're working on is or is not cohesive, or has a mood that runs through what we're doing. I think we're not listening with that in mind to individual songs. I think we're just confident that when we're done mixing, we'll find a sequence in which some or all the songs will hold together in a way that is meaningful to us. But I don't think the fact that the records have individual and distinct personalities it's not surprising, but I don't think it's the plan either. It
just happened as a result of three musicians getting together and creating something at a moment in time.
Yeah.
Okay. When you're going through this vast library of documentation that James is doing with the computer, and you're sort of saying, "Oh man, that's a good one," or maybe that's we'll shelve that one or what have you. When you look at that, and when you also look at being in the moment, jamming and working on the pieces in your rehearsal space or your studio, what portion of each album do you think, like as you're coming up with it, you're like, wow, this is good, this is one for the album, and what portion maybe comes from later on listening to what you've recorded and you say, wow, that's one for the album? In other words, as you're composing on the spot, or as you're working on pieces that you may have already worked on, are there certain ones that have stood out to you guys as like, this is definitely going on the next project? And are there other ones that maybe surprised you, or you sort of didn't even remember you did them, and then you listen back, to this
kind of yes to everything?
Yes to everything.
I mean, there's things that we can be really enthusiastic about, and then at a certain point completely lose interest in, or feel like we have to go back to the beginning, and then there's other ones where you just completely forgot about something, and especially with this record when we could pick the smallest element of a recording and use it and repurpose it. So in that sense, it wasn't like this would make a great song. It's sort of like this would make the basis of something we would like to work on for the next week.
Which was super fun. Like,
I can imagine.
Just working on one song for a few weeks in a row, because we were at our place and we sort of had the freedom to
explore.
And try and fail and try stuff, and if it worked, great.
Let's try the reggae version.
Let's not go crazy. But just kind of find to take the time to have to make mistakes and have accidental discoveries of when you were going for one thing and missing it, but finding something else, and then just one day thinking, that one guitar part let's just start a new session and mute everything else and just hear that guitar part.
Oh wow, okay.
or one like a backing vocal
Yeah.
track and building something just out of that, and
Sure.
just kind of eliminating the middleman of finding a remixer and
Right.
kind of doing it ourselves.
That's great.
It was really fun.
That is really fun. When I was listening to the history of you guys recorded, I guess you could say,
Good title.
from the beginning of your early stuff to this current one, I was struck by some very specific production decisions that were made along the way. I'm guessing by sort of other people outside the band members, and in some cases, certain songs evoked very specific flavors of like late 50s, early 60s, or sort of other time periods, other styles. And so I guess a question that I had was, given your eclectic instrumentation at times and your use of what would now be classified as vintage keyboards and guitars, but in some cases might simply be just instruments that you had, sort of.
Yeah.
How much of those vintage sounds that occur in certain spots on some of your albums, how much of that was sort of thought out in advance, like, let's go for a 60s flavor or something, and how much of that do you feel like maybe just a reflection of the actual instruments you're playing, and that's the wonderful sounds that they have? Because like an ace tone has a certain sound, and if you play that,
That's true.
no matter what kind of music you're playing, it's going to take you back in time, or at least the people who are familiar with it, it's going to take you back to a certain moment in time that's not in 2018, or something like that. So,
Well, the ace tone is something is one of our, maybe the first organ we had, right? And I think it almost just became part of the band.
yeah,
because
like the fourth
it's on
member or something.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
so much
Yeah.
stuff over many records.
And it's so great.
It
I mean,
keeps doing
yeah.
that.
Yeah, it kind of was. I think it was kind of a fourth member because we sort of devised ways to play it while playing another instrument at the same time. So
Okay.
it was kind of a non-human fourth member of the band where we could duct tape a few keys down and
Nice.
turn it on and off when we felt like it.
Well,
and
the first thing was we had Sudden Organ, which didn't
Yeah,
have
right.
that title yet, but was written on guitar and then played on the organ, and we loved it, and we wanted to take the organ on tour with us, and it just
It
would
wasn't
have
ours.
seemed well, we took it anyway, but it would have seemed really like, if you're going to lug this thing around, you got to find something else to do with it.
Right.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
True.
well, it's like we have this fourth member now.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
you're singing one song,
Yeah.
but
What else can you do?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it was motivated to find.
But when we've been in studios and have access to gear that we
Yeah, of
don't
course,
have,
of course.
we totally have. Hey, we should pull that thing that weighs 2 million pounds and put it in.
Yeah, why not? Because you have the opportunity, and you don't have to lug it around.
So,
Yeah,
so that's happened too.
definitely
Yeah.
like the vibes. That
Vibes,
Alex the Great.
yeah.
Oh
definitely.
yeah, sure.
The B3.
Yeah.
Yeah, nobody wants to lug around a B3.
Hell no.
But as far as evoking
Yeah.
genres and stuff, that depends on the song. There's times we've specifically tried to do it, and other times it's
Right, just what it
accidental,
sounds
or
like.
we've
It's just what it
tried
sounds
not
like,
to.
yeah.
Yeah.
Many critics and reviewers in my research that I did on the internet and sort of reading articles and seeing some interviews with you have compared you to various bands and artists. Someone described you as the Velvet Underground meets krautrock meets something, and the list went on and on. And it was like 15 different influences that this guy postulated. I thought it was wonderful. I mean, it really kind of covered a lot of bases. Your music strikes me as very lush and spacious on many of the albums, and I know I'm not the first person to say that. It's a wonderful way to describe what it is that you do, if there's a sound that you have. So I guess one question that I have is, who were, or perhaps maybe still are, some of your greatest musical influences? And maybe even more importantly, because than just simply influencing you, are there any musicians or groups or artists, maybe even outside of the scope of music, but in the creative fields, that inspired you, guys, to do what it is that you do, to make you want to be musicians in the first place, and to do this kind of music as opposed to any number of other kinds of music?
Gosh.
That's a toughie. I mean, I think it probably goes without saying that all three of us love a lot of different kinds of music.
Yeah.
Like whole array.
You can tell it must come from many
and
different areas. And
over time, too. You discover something
sure.
that may have been around for, 60 years or 50 years, and then, but I only heard it, 2 years ago.
Yeah, isn't that, it's a wonderful thing about art and music is
yeah.
that even if it was done hundreds of years ago, for example,
right.
It's the first time you're experiencing
right.
it. Could be last Tuesday.
I think the influence question's always, run away from it before, because I feel like everything
influences.
It's and the way it's used, which is generally to say what are your favorite things, but you can be just as inspired to not do something by something you encounter,
something that's bad that you hear, and you're like, man, I would never do it that way.
Doesn't ring true to you, or it's not necessarily bad, but it's just not like you brought up the reggae drum set.
I know, I saw
nothing wrong with a reggae beat.
Two of the three of you were like,
but it doesn't,
it wouldn't capture.
It wouldn't feel natural.
Yeah, sure.
Yet.
Yeah.
So, I feel like there's always things that are kind of inspiring and just. So to kind of narrow it down to say, Velvet Underground meets crowd rock.
But it is cool that people
have taken a lot of time to surmise.
They hear stuff, and it becomes a personal thing. I mean, I'll do that when I see bands. You go like, oh, this little thing reminds me of that band, and this little thing reminds me of that.
This is what I was experiencing as I was walking around town listening to some of your albums.
Right.
On my portable CD player. Does anybody even use those anymore? I still have one.
Oh, wow.
It has the shock resistance. So
nice. That's very important.
So a related question I have.
Well, let me just kind of amplify that a little bit. I think on the current record, the shoe ops of Forever, which are so unmistakably us imitating, I Only Have Eyes for You.
Yes.
But I don't think there's a person here who would describe, I love that song,
of course.
But I don't think the flamingos loom particularly large in any of our lives. But there was just something in that moment where this collective memory and collective, I don't know, it just, and we, and rather than do something like it, we did something
that was it.
Yeah. And it just kind of felt right in the moment, but I don't feel like that was a reflection of the influence that doo-wop has had on
understood.
the
Sure,
band.
of course. And in a way that goes with the whole snippets ethos, taking snippets of things from, analyzing your library recordings that you're doing of yourself, in a way just sort of, let's take a snippet of some doo-wop. I think that's great. How tuned in have you been during the recording of any one or all of your albums to the other music, the other band's music, the other music industry, or not even industry, let's say just music that's out there that might not be commercialized or signed or whatever? How aware have you been about what the trends and the things that are going on around you guys as you're recording and as you're writing? Does that enter into anything at all, or is it just sort of there and you kind of say, oh, hi, and then you back to what you do?
Personally, I don't really think about it very much.
Not at all. Less and less.
Yeah, probably less and less. Yeah.
Is it fair to say that any influences, if we wanted to admit that there are, whether you tell me what they are or not, tend to be influences that came from earlier on during your formative years, as opposed to hearing some new artist, regardless of how old they are, regardless of whether it's a solo artist or a group that's out right now?
I think we're always, especially if you're willing to accept my definition of influence as life.
That's true.
We're continuing to live, and so things are different. I think it's one of the things that's rewarding about not making a record every year is, I think, especially if you kind of remove stuff like that there from the equation, because it was, we knew we had a plan, which is pretty unusual for us. But if the 5 years between Fade and this record, I think to a large extent the difference of the way those records sound is just because we've lived 5 more years.
Yeah, sure.
So I think it's always things that we're listening to, that we're thinking about, that we're experiencing. That's not just re-channeling things from the past. Hope not. Flamingos for the
No, I know I like flamingos. It's good stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, you get different stuff out of music at different times in your life. Like I get, in my example, I get different stuff out of Public Enemy now than I did in 1989.
Sure.
It could all be stemming from the same record I bought one day.
Right.
And then as I continue to grow older and change,
perspective changes, but
precisely
the actual piece of recorded medium doesn't change in any way whatsoever. But the way that we hear it changes.
Exactly.
That's something that's wonderful about music. I want to talk about your new album a little bit, though. Going back to an interview that I heard Ira do, I think it was with a French TV station or something. There's something that's on YouTube, and no. Actually, it was on one of your public radio performances. I can't remember. It's K something. I know, right? You discussed how, when you're recording a certain album, you give everything through the collaboration in the studio, through the process of making the songs, and I think you mentioned that a lot of times you write the lyrics afterwards. But you were saying that you give, and then when you're done and the album is recorded and mixed, you said there's this moment, I guess, when you wonder if it will ever be possible to make another album again. Do you remember that you said this, or because I'm definitely not? I'm not putting words in your mouth.
No, I still feel that way. So,
but good. So that much is. So I got this right. But then I guess as time passes, you added that sort of once again there's some sort of pull maybe to create a new album or something. So I guess the question I had, because I thought that it was really interesting the way that you said that in that interview. How do you know when it's time? I mean, in this case, 5 years went by. Was there some sort of pull for any one of you or the three of you that said, it is time for us to make a new album? It's time. The universe or our creative nature or something is telling us it's time. How do you know that?
I feel like we do kind of unconsciously have some kind of a clock.
Yeah.
Where it just feels like, I think it is kind of a cyclical, write, record, tour,
something,
and then I guess it's time to write some songs again.
Okay.
Because we don't really stockpile stuff, like write 100 songs and then kind of keep culling. Yeah. It's like normally we empty it out each cycle for the large part.
Right.
Which would then go back to what you were saying, that sort of you give, and then you sort of there's some sort of emptiness or a vacuum left afterwards. Which maybe is great, because after however much time passes, it gives us a chance for something to come in.
Clean slate.
You made a space for it, right?
Yeah.
And it's of a time, even if pieces are old or whatever.
Sure.
You still feel like, well, this is like what we did in this period. And who knows what the next one will be.
That's exciting. I think it's wonderful. How did you experience the shift from having external producers working with the band, maybe giving you some sorts of advice in the studio, or certainly determining microphone placement, determining, sort of separation or lack thereof? I know that was an issue that was talked about a lot in some of the other interviews and in some of the other things that I saw online. A lot of bleed, which in a way has become a big part of your sound, certainly. Because if you're not isolating everything, then something's going to come into the drum mic, and the drums are going to come into something else mic, et cetera, et cetera. How did not having a producer and the shift from whatever that meant to you guys, that there was somebody else that was making decisions, however much of those decisions were being made by somebody else, how did that manifest itself with the music on this album? Like this idea oh wow, we don't have to answer to anybody. We can create what we want, what we feel, and it will truly be what we want and what we feel. We don't have to say, like, oh, we can't do that because...
Well, I don't think we've ever... I mean, we've not had to answer to anyone, and Roger, produced so many of the records.
Seemed pretty flexible.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Right.
And
with the band's best interest in mind, it seemed like,
But I would say a difference between him and John McIntyre, who produced Fade, is that Roger is much more interested in expressing his opinion, and John is very reluctant to, and really... So a lot of a dynamic with Roger that was very common is that if there was disagreement within the band, Roger was very interested in saying where, either one person's opinion that he thought was right, or what combination, how we should go about resolving a conflict. Where John really, without even saying it, was well, let me know when you guys decide. So
sort of almost like different approaches to therapy or something in a way, kind of, right? You know what I mean? Like, I don't mean to suggest that you needed therapy in any way, but what I mean is, sort of like some people in an authority position or a counseling position or something like this, a consultant position, whatever, however you want to refer to it, they're going to say, okay, I've heard all of the opinions, and now let's say that opinion A and D are the best ones. Like, let's choose. And you're saying that that John has been more like, okay, I hear you, and stepping back a little bit,
But I think, I think the working with him definitely led to us doing this record ourselves, because we got much more adept at really kind of...
You need the room in 8 or 9, 10 minutes, right? Something like that. Awesome.
Locating the consensus or establishing consensus rather than sort of staying heightened where, well, I want to try it this way, well, I want to try it this way, and maybe we'll do it both ways, but instead we just work. I mean, I think we've always worked together pretty well, but I think the, not having a, to quote politics of the past, not having a decider.
Maybe that's a great word, decider. Sure.
I think things became somehow more efficient in our communication with each other and what we collectively wanted to do, and I think it just meant it was sort of obvious that
you no longer needed a decider.
And we enjoyed doing it ourselves, and it was like, hey, and then James has just kept learning more and more about recording.
It's awesome.
But it also wasn't a plan. It wasn't like, I think really everyone enjoys having, the input and mixing with John was fantastic.
Sure.
It wasn't like we thought, okay, you know what, we're ready to do this ourselves.
Right.
It was more of a function of we were working for a long time without even realize. I think at that point we still thought we were going to go, whether it was with John or somebody else, go to someone's studio with this stuff we've been working on and make a record. And it was somewhere along the line that we figured out that not only can we do it ourselves, we're already
doing it.
A third done.
Yeah, it was a crazy, slow revelation, because the idea was like, are we like self-engineering a record? Like, that's impossible. That's crazy. But then I thought it was like, it's like, are we playing music in front of people? That's crazy. I never thought I could do that. And like, am I right? Are we writing songs? That's unheard of.
Sure.
So it was
a logical step along the evolution of.
But it was awesome. It was a really awesome feeling. It's like, wow. It's like 30 some years on. It's like there's this
our baby is all grown up.
But it's like a huge brand new thing.
Yeah.
And it was super exciting.
That is super
exciting. Felt great.
But I don't think there's any I don't think there's any feeling like, oh, we'll never work with someone else again. This is now what we do. It's what we did.
Yeah.
It's the way it happened to have happened. Gotcha. Right? You've done some really creative recording over the years and made. No, I did that one. Hold on a second. No, that is the one I'm doing. Yep. And you've made some really interesting production decisions. I heard an interview where Ira was talking about the use of heavily processed toilet flushings and air conditioner bangings in one of your songs, "Big Day Coming."
Yes.
And I was wondering, since you had so much freedom in your rehearsal space and in the process of creating this album, are there any things that stand out to you that certain sounds, if they're not secret and you don't mind sharing? Certainly, the readers of the magazine would drool over this. Are there any things that we can listen to in this new album that I listened to over the past weekend where the sounds did come from the same sort of place?
Well, the air conditioner got left on the cutting room floor.
That'll be a bonus track at some point. There was a guitar solo that we recorded on this record where we used multiple microphones, but one of them was a microphone that our guitar tech, who's also a really great solo and group musician on his own, Kevin Micah, who has a group called Animal Hospital, built a contact microphone inside of like a loose T, like a Twinings T box.
Wow, okay.
Like a little aluminum box and it just has a 1/4-inch jack into it.
Interesting.
And we actually just took the box and duct taped it to an amplifier.
Okay.
And that's what it said. That's just what it sounded like.
Oh,
It
cool.
just sounded like the end of the world. And that was a lot of fun.
And that made it onto one of the tracks on your
Sure
album?
did.
Will you tell us which one, or do we have to figure it out?
I think you can figure it out.
Okay. Awesome. I can't wait. I can't wait to go back and listen to it now that now that you've said that. I will definitely go tonight when I get home. I'll go back and listen to it.
They all sound like that.
Be careful.
Well,
Be careful.
One of the songs started with a sound check. We were I don't know, just sitting on stage waiting to play, and I forget what happened, and Georgia started playing a drum beat, and I was sitting at the keyboard and just started playing along with her. And James just pulled out his iPhone and recorded about 30 seconds of this, and we ended up looping it and building a whole song around it.
that is cool. Sound can just come from so many great places, and interesting sound is interesting sound, regardless of whether it comes from the likely place or the unlikely place, right?
That toilet, that was Roger's idea. I'm almost 100% sure.
Oh yeah. Yeah. The toilet and the Eventide harmonizer.
We wanted to record singing in the bathroom because of
the tiles and nice reverberation.
but because of the fact that the lyrics are written late, we needed lyric sheets, and the fluorescent light in the bathroom was humming.
So
it was just creating a problem for that. So Roger's whole solution to that was to take the hum and process it, and then once that was going, they added the toilet, and the bathroom became the whole.
How could you resist?
It became an instrument in a way, right?
Too, a couple times.
That's right.
Some vocals in the bathroom.
Oh, cool.
Drums too.
Nice.
Right.
Were there any interesting or difficult production decisions that you had to make, being that there wasn't a decider? You were the decider. So for this new album, There's a Riot Going On, were there any times where the decisions were more challenging or like kind of a slight impasse at times compared to what might have happened?
Sure. I don't remember specifically, but I'm sure I know.
That's a testament to the buddy-buddiness of your group.
We had some snags, but you get through them.
Yeah, there was a lot of tech stuff where we were recording, but we were recording like as it was happening, and so I had to make crazy gain structure decisions based on like we need this now, and trying to find solutions to problems, and then the very humbling moments of taking the sessions to John and having him redo some of my structure.
Well, it's funny you say humbling, but my recollection of it is different, which is that in one of those cases where John redid the gain structure, and I might as well be speaking Latin. I don't understand
of course,
what I'm talking about.
Sure.
But I do know that when John took something that we had done wrong and made it right, it didn't sound as good anymore. And he kept, and we kept saying, like, well, what about, and because that's the worst, one of the reasons we avoided demos for so many years is the amount of time you spend, like, chasing this rough mix or this demo. And
so many times it's better than the final mix.
So we have this thing and we're like, I understand you've done this stuff, but why do I like our old version better?
Right.
And he finally went back to the wrong gain structure. I was like, yeah.
Wow.
That's what we like. And that's what we ended up using. So there is, digital recording, as far as I understand, is not supposed to work that way.
Yeah.
That sounds like analog, like, oh, you oversaturate this, you do that. But somehow we managed to find
we broke it.
That's awesome.
Well, I mean, a lot of the stuff that like a lot of the stuff that got recorded was really spontaneous, and a lot of it was like happening for the first time, kind of unrehearsed and just kind of naturally being played. And I think similarly, a lot of the technical decisions followed that emotionally and preserved like this kind of spontaneous discovery feeling for all the way around on every level.
Yeah.
That happened a lot.
I wish that had been happening in a microphone.
Yeah.
Oh well.
Yeah, I know.
But even with Roger, and he was, he was great. He went along with a lot of stuff that was not the right way to do things, and
because when you heard it, you guys said, this is the way it has to sound."
Yeah, or I mean, there's one instance. There's probably more than one instance, but there's definitely one I'm thinking of where I played something and I was just like working it out while the tape was running. I hadn't even like really figured out what I was going to do yet, and we all liked it so much better. But he hadn't quite mic'd things up the way he planned to. But we were just like, well, we're gonna
keep it
anyway.
Oh, that's cool.
Well, Georgia tried. I'm sure we're talking about the same one. Georgia tried to turn it into a part and record it better, and it just didn't have.
It didn't have the same feeling.
Do you remember what song and album it was?
Yeah.
but you don't want to tell because you don't want us to know that it was a happy accident. Am I right? It's okay.
Okay.
I'm not going to pry.
There's a million examples of that.
Listen,
we just all happen to be talking about the same one.
I get it. I have one final question. When you guys started on this journey, you were operating outside the mainstream of the music business at the time, obviously. And you were able to forge ahead, gather many, many fans, gather impetus, change labels, secured your Matador deal, which has lasted longer than a lot of bands have stayed with any one label. Given that you were originally operating on the fringes of the music business and you created this working, successful model for your particular music with your particular fan base, and it's continued in various incarnations through today with this current album, how have the changes in the music business and the dismantlement of the music business in a way, how has that affected you guys?
I'm afraid we're out of time.
Yeah. That's my final question.
I'm sorry, I have to say, to a certain extent, I stopped listening at the thought that we're not on the fringes of the music business. That seems preposterous to me, that we are not on the fringes still.
No, I'm saying I feel like you are.
We are.
Yeah.
Well, then
no, I'm saying that
I thought you were saying we used to be.
No, I'm saying given that you started that way and you're still that way.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Because you're not operating within the model of the music business, but given that the music business has changed so much anyway, and the model is...
The fringe still stays the same.
The fringe, I guess, maybe that's true. Maybe that's the answer. The fringe still stays the same.
I don't know.
It's, obviously, it's not the most interesting topic for us. It's these things... We can't, we could rage against downloading, we could rage against streaming, all these things, you're just not going to change it. So you may as well just do what you do. And I think the three of us have loved working together for a long time. I think in a lot of ways, even more now than we used to. And a lot of that is just by just trying our best to just ignore what's going on around us.
That's great.